What's going on, guys? Back at it with the Sunday drive, and yes, this is the second video I've dropped today. So for the next few Sundays, you guys are going to be getting not only the Sunday drive but also a manual swap video until that whole series is complete. Now I am still editing, so I'm not going to be dropping 2 a day. I want to say for at least a week, and then we might start dropping 2 a day, but we'll see. Now in addition to that, it is coming out a little bit late. I'm sorry. I spent the day down in La Jolla picking up a transmission and actually filmed this Sunday drive going up there, but on the freeway it's really shaky, and so the camera was all over the place and I didn't really like it. And I'm not trying to post low quality stuff, so I scrapped the whole footage and here we are. So because the manual transmission from this is out of the convertible, I did need a new one for the convertible, so I went and grabbed one. I don't really have a topic for today, so I'm going to tell you guys a story. And this story is basically the origin of how I became a car enthusiast in the first place. So growing up, my family weren't really car people. They're not really car enthusiasts. I never really had any sports cars, and they didn't really have any friends that had any sports cars, so I was never really around enthusiast or performance cars to begin with. Now, the only thing that I ever really heard about sports cars was actually from my dad. At the time, he drove a 97 Ford F-150, a green crew cab, and my mom had a little red, I believe it was a 98, Volvo S70 sedan. So they weren't really performance cars or sports cars. The only thing I would ever hear about was my dad had a 1969 Mach 1 Mustang, and he shoved a big old 429 in it, which is basically a 7-liter V8 in his little Mustang, and it went fast. And his buddy also had a 69 Camaro, and he put a supercharger on it, so that was also super fast. All I ever really heard about was how fast his Mustang was and how fast his friend's Camaro was. So I sort of grew up thinking like muscle cars were the stuff, and more specifically Mustangs were the shit. So Mustangs were fast, that's all I ever heard about. And I was like 8 or 9 at the time, so basically true ignorance about performance cars. Ignorance in its true definition, meaning like just a lack of knowledge. Like I didn't know any better. Like I was 8, all I heard about was my dad's super fast Mustang, and I was like, oh dude, Mustangs are the best, you know what I mean? So I sort of grew up in that state of mind. Now when I was like 10, I got a Nintendo DS for Christmas, and along with that, I got a Need for Speed Most Wanted. And so I get into the game, super fun, you know, I'm having a blast, and I start out with like the Chevy Cobalt or something like that. Work my way up, get better cars, all that stuff. And eventually, I get a Mustang GT. So I'm like, oh dude, game over, I got the fastest car there is, the freaking Mustang GT. So I start racing with it, and I start beating other cars, start beating bosses, moving up. And I'm just like dominating with this Mustang. And I get to a race, and it's kind of like a canyon carvy race, you know, lots of turns, all that stuff. And I lost the race. And up until that point, I really hadn't modded the Mustang at all. And so I was like, alright, fair enough, I was bound to lose eventually with this bone stock Mustang. I start throwing some upgrades in it, you know, freaking wheels, engine internals, all that stuff, and getting it faster. And then I go run the race again, and I still lose. And so then I'm like frustrated. So I go back, do like a bunch of races that I already won just to get some more money. And then eventually my Mustang was like completely modded out to the point where I couldn't buy any more mods for it because I hadn't unlocked anymore. Again, I still couldn't win the freaking race, so I was like pissed. So I start looking on forums, and I came across one, and some guy's like, oh yeah, that Lotus Elise is just faster. And that was the car I kept losing to, was a freaking Lotus Elise. And so my inner 10-year-old's like, nah dude, Mustang's the best there is. I'm not gonna lose to a Lotus. So I keep racing, and I keep trying to beat it, and I'm like racing this thing for like a week, just kept on losing, you know? Been daily playing, trying to beat this freaking Lotus, and I can't do it. So I was like, alright, I'll bite. So I sold the Mustang, and then I bought a Lotus. And I beat the race on my second try in a bone stock car. And so I was like, freaking mind blower, right? Just like totally like opened my eyes, and I was like, bruh. So I start looking into it, looking into why the Lotus is faster. I didn't even look into it like on game forums. I was legitimately looking into why the Lotus as a real car was actually faster than the Mustang. So I started learning about lightweight and power to weight ratios and handling and suspension designs and all that stuff. And so I quickly came to realize that power isn't everything. So I keep playing the game, I keep getting faster cars, upgrading them, and then like learning about the cars that I'm driving in the game. Lamborghini Gallardo, the Porsche Carrera GT, Ford GT, all that stuff. And of course, the last car in the game is a freaking M3 GTR, so seed planted, right? Now in addition to that, when I turned about 15, my dad bought a E92 335. We traded in the Volvo. And that was a little bit after I got my driver's permit. So I was driving my dad's F-150, which turned out to be my first car. My mom had a Chevy Suburban at the time, a 2007 Suburban. So I was driving those cars and getting used to how they drove. And then the first time I drove the 335 was like a totally different machine. It was incredible. The way the car carried itself, it was unlike anything I'd ever driven before. You know, it was tight, it was nimble. The Suburban and the F-150, they're fairly soulless cars. They don't have really any character to them. They're just utility vehicles. The 335, on the other hand, had this feeling about it. It wanted to play. You know, the way the suspension felt, the way the car felt, the way the engine felt, it was just antagonizing you to push it harder. It sort of had this feeling to it like, come on. It just carried that soul about it, and I felt that through the car when I was 15. And I had never driven anything that was eager like that before. The Suburban didn't drive like that. The Ford F-150 didn't drive like that. They were just normal cars. And so in addition to it driving like that and driving nicer and being a way more well-refined car, it really stuck in my mind that these cars are a little bit different than normal cars. And so I started looking into it, why it was doing the way it was, why it felt like that, how the engine works, what gave it that sort of character. I started searching for the soul of the car in the spec sheet. Figured out the weight distribution, the power delivery, all that stuff. It was really cool. And so I started looking into them, and my dad paid like $30-something thousand for that 335, and like a year later I got a job at Vaughn's, and I was making not even $10 an hour at the time, and there was no way I could afford a $30,000 car. And so I started looking into other 3 Series that sort of carry the same platform. Independent suspension, good weight distribution, all that stuff. And I found out about the E36, and the M3s have 3.2s, which is pretty damn close. The 335 has a 3-liter, same front and rear suspension type, limited slip diff, good weight distribution, all that stuff. And E36s were only like $4 or $5 grand, so that was like perfect. Now I was still comparing the Mustang and the E36, and one day we were driving home from school, and I carpooled with some of my friends, and my good friend Alex actually spotted a black M3 convertible on the side of the road for sale. Dude was asking about $4 grand for it, which was a little bit more than I had at the time. And so I give the guy a call, and we're talking about the car, and of course it has its issues. It's a $4,000 M3, it's not cherry. You know, the convertible top didn't work all the time, it leaked in the rain, it was automatic, it had issues, it leaked oil, leaked coolant, all that good stuff. And I was kind of deciding if I really wanted to buy it, and then I went and test drove it. And it was old, it was a little bit creaky, you know, it wasn't as nice or as new as that 335, so it wasn't as refined. And it didn't have as much power, so it wasn't as fast, but the way the car drove, the way it presented itself, was exactly the same as the 335. It carried the same soul. And so after that test drive, I was like, dude, I freaking need one. And I just fell in love with how that car drove, and even to this day, it's still freaking an amazing car to drive. And that's where the story of the convertible began. And that is a whole nother story in of itself. So let me know, do you guys like this? Do you guys like the story format? I don't know, this is like the first one I've done, so let me know in the comments down below. Also, let me know how you guys fall in love with cars. I'd love to read that. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Keep it fresh, and I will see you guys later.